People say old photographs never lie. But that isn't true. Some photographs don't lie, they wait. They wait for someone foolish enough to look closer. They wait for curious eyes to notice what was never meant to be seen. This photograph was taken in 1890. A simple family portrait. A mother. A father. 3 children, nothing unusual at first glance. But when historians enlarged the image in 2014, they noticed something impossible. One of the children wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking through it, and the longer you stare at his face, the more it feels like he's staring back. The photograph was discovered inside a collapsed farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania, buried beneath rotting floorboards and wrapped in oilcloth stiff with age. The house had been abandoned for more than a century, untouched since the winter of 1891 when the entire Whitmore family vanished without a single recorded death certificate. No graves, no witnesses, no answers. The image itself was a classic studio portrait for its time. Sepia-toned. Carefully staged. The family sat rigid, forced still by long exposure times. The father stood in the back, hand resting on the mother's shoulder. The mother sat upright, lips pressed tight, eyes dull with exhaustion. 3 children were arranged in front of them, 2 girls on the left, 1 boy on the right. That boy was the problem. At first, archivists assumed the unease came from poor lighting or lens distortion. Old cameras often produced strange artifacts, but the longer they studied the boy's face, the more wrong it felt. His eyes weren't aligned correctly. They didn't reflect light the same way as the others. And his mouth was open, not smiling, just enough to suggest he was mid-breath. But exposure times in 1890 were slow. No child could hold their mouth open like that without blurring, except he hadn't blurred at all. The Whitmore family records were sparse. Census data listed 4 household members, not 5. Father Edgar Whitmore, mother Margaret Whitmore, daughters Clara and Evelyn. No son. Yet the photograph clearly showed one. Local church registries were searched next. Baptisms, funerals, birth records, nothing. The boy did not exist on paper, but he existed in silver nitrate and shadow. When the image was digitally enhanced, a detail emerged that made even seasoned historians uncomfortable. The boy's face was unnaturally sharp, clearer than the rest of the photograph, as if he had moved after the exposure should have ended. His eyes weren't just focused. They were alert, aware, and his gaze wasn't directed at the photographer. It was directed at whoever would someday find the picture. A note was discovered sewn into the lining of the oilcloth wrapping the photograph. The handwriting was erratic, the ink faded but legible. It read, "We did not invite him. He stood with us anyway. No signature, no date, just that." Local folklore filled in what official records could not. Neighbors had whispered about the Whitmore farmhouse long before it was abandoned. Children were warned never to walk near it after sunset. Animals refused to approach the property. Even birds avoided the trees surrounding the house. The family was described as quiet but wrong. Margaret Whitmore was said to speak to empty rooms. Edgar was seen digging behind the house late at night, even in frozen ground. And Clara, the eldest daughter, once told a schoolteacher something that ended her attendance permanently. She had said calmly, "He sleeps in the walls. He doesn't like doors." The last confirmed sighting of the Whitmore family occurred on a Sunday morning. Church bells rang. The Whitmores never arrived. That night, neighbors reported lights moving through the house. Not lantern light, but something dimmer, pulsing, as if breathing. By morning, the farmhouse was silent. When authorities finally entered days later, they found no bodies, no blood, no struggle, just furniture overturned and deep scratches carved into the inside of the walls, marks that started low and climbed upward. When experts zoomed into the photograph again, they noticed something new. The boy's hand. It was resting on Clara's shoulder. His fingers were too long, bent at the wrong angles, and Clara's shoulder was bruised. The Whitmores did not call the boy a son. They did not call him a ghost. They did not even call him a name. In the few surviving fragments of Margaret Whitmore's personal journal, he was referred to only as the extra, not another child, not someone living with them, an addition that was never invited. The journal was found years after the photograph, hidden inside the false bottom of a cedar chest recovered from the farmhouse ruins. Most pages were ruined by moisture, the ink bleeding into unreadable stains, but several entries remained intact. The earliest was dated March 3, 1889. Clara says there is a boy in the hallway again. I told her not to imagine things. But tonight, Edgar heard footsteps too. At first, the entries described small disturbances, footsteps where no one stood, breathing behind doors, a child's shadow where no child should be. Margaret insisted it was stress. Edgar blamed the house. The house had been built decades earlier on land no one wanted. Too close to the woods. too close to the sinkholes that opened without warning. Locals said the ground there remembered things. By April, the tone of the journal changed. He sits at the foot of Evelyn's bed. He doesn't speak. He smiles when she cries. Margaret wrote that mirrors no longer reflected the rooms accurately. Sometimes they showed extra figures. Sometimes they showed fewer. Once, she caught her own reflection looking back at her from a different angle. The children noticed him first. Clara said he whispered numbers to her at night. Numbers that didn't stop. Numbers that made her teeth hurt. Evelyn refused to sleep unless the door was locked, and even then she would wake screaming, claiming hands came through the keyhole. The boy never touched Edgar or Margaret. Only the children. Edgar attempted to confront it. That night, he stood in the hallway with a lantern and demanded the thing show itself. Margaret wrote only one sentence about what happened next. Edgar saw him. Edgar sat down and did not move for hours. After that night, Edgar refused to sleep inside the house. He stayed in the barn, even during storms. He stopped speaking to his daughters. He stopped making eye contact with Margaret. And he began digging. Neighbors noticed the holes behind the farmhouse. Too narrow to be graves. Too deep to be wells. Edgar filled them back in every morning, only to dig again the next night. When questioned, he said only this: "If I give him somewhere else to go, maybe he'll leave the walls." By early summer, Margaret stopped denying the boy's presence. Her journal entries no longer questioned him. They described him. He smells like damp wood. He does not blink. He stands closer each time I look away. She wrote that he began to imitate the family. He stood where Edgar stood, sat where Margaret sat, moved only when they weren't watching. But there was one thing he wanted more than anything: to be included. The idea of the photograph came from him. The Whitmores had planned a family portrait to send to relatives. A normal thing. A final attempt at normalcy. Margaret wrote, "He watched us prepare. He stood behind the photographer before the camera was ready. When the photographer asked if there was anyone else to be included, Margaret said no. The boy stepped forward anyway. No one remembered inviting him. No one remembered telling him where to stand. But when the plate was exposed, he was there, perfectly still, perfectly clear." The photographer later claimed something was wrong with the image. He said the camera felt heavier afterward. He said the plate made a sound while developing, like scratching glass. When he tried to discard the negative, Margaret stopped him. She insisted the photograph be kept, because, according to the journal, something changed after that day. He stays quieter now. He watches the picture more than us. For a short time, the house felt calmer. The children slept. The walls were silent. The mirrors behaved. Edgar stopped digging. Margaret believed the photograph had done what nothing else could. It had anchored him. But anchoring something is not the same as controlling it. And whatever the boy was, he did not like being trapped. The final entry in Margaret's journal was written the night before the family vanished. The handwriting was jagged, frantic. He says the picture isn't enough. He says families stay together. He says if he cannot leave the frame, then neither will we. When modern experts zoomed further into the photograph, they noticed something else. Behind the boy, barely visible, was a second outline. Not a shadow, a shape, as if something larger was standing just behind him. Watching, waiting. The Whitmores tried to destroy the photograph on a Tuesday. Margaret remembered the day clearly because Tuesdays were when the boy stayed quiet. He never appeared on Tuesdays. He never stood in doorways or pressed his face into mirrors. It was the only day the house felt almost empty again. That was why they chose it. Edgar built a fire behind the farmhouse, far from the walls, far from the rooms where the boy liked to stand and listen. He brought kerosene. Margaret carried the photograph wrapped tightly in cloth, refusing to look at it directly. Clara cried when she saw it. Evelyn screamed. They both said the same thing. He knows. When Margaret unwrapped the photograph, the boy was smiling. Not the stiff, unnatural smile seen in the original print. This one was wider. The photographer had sworn the boy did not smile when the picture was taken. Yet here he was, teeth showing, eyes bright, fingers curled slightly inward as if gripping the edge of something unseen. Edgar poured the kerosene. The liquid soaked into the paper slowly, darkening the image. And then something impossible happened. The boy's eyes closed, not blurred, not damaged, closed. The fire took quickly, too quickly. The flames leapt high, bending inward instead of rising, as if drawn toward the photograph. Margaret said she heard a sound like breathing through wet cloth. Then, Clara screamed again. The photograph did not burn evenly. The edges blackened and curled. The parents' faces vanished into ash, but the boy remained untouched. The fire burned around him, avoided him. When Edgar reached into the flames with a shovel, trying to scatter what remained, the heat struck him like a wall. He fell back, skin blistered, screaming that something had grabbed the metal. And then the wind stopped. The fire went out on its own. What remained of the photograph fell into the dirt. The boy's face was still there, only now his head was slightly tilted, as if curious. That night, the house erupted with sound. Not whispers, not footsteps, scraping. From inside the walls, long, dragging motions moving from room to room, the sound of nails pulled slowly across wood. The walls bowed inward in places, as if something heavy pressed from the other side. Margaret wrote, "He is not standing still anymore. The mirrors cracked. Doors opened themselves. The children were dragged from their beds by unseen hands and left trembling in the hallway, staring at the same spot on the wall, a spot where the wallpaper peeled away in strips. Behind it were scratches, hundreds of them, all facing outward." Edgar finally spoke. He told Margaret what he had seen the first night he confronted the boy. He said the thing had no back, only a front, only a face. And behind that face was depth, not emptiness, space, like a doorway pretending to be a child. The digging resumed, this time inside the house. Edgar tore up floorboards with shaking hands, convinced there was something beneath the foundation. Something older than the house. Something the boy was connected to. When he broke through, he didn't find earth. He found a hollow, a space too large to exist beneath such a small structure. The air rising from it was cold, and it smelled like the boy. Damp wood. Old breath. Forgotten places. Margaret made a decision that night. If the photograph could anchor him, then maybe something else could replace it. She gathered family items, locks of hair, baby teeth, clothing worn close to the skin. She stitched them together into a crude bundle and lowered it into the hollow beneath the house. As she did, she spoke to the boy directly for the first time. She told him he could stay, but he had to stay there. The house went silent. Too silent. No breathing, no scratching, no boy. For 3 days. On the 4th morning, the family woke to find a new photograph hanging in the hallway. They did not own a camera. The image showed the Whitmores asleep in their beds. All of them, including the boy. This time, he was not standing. He was lying between the children, and his eyes were open. When investigators later studied the original 1890 portrait again, they noticed something overlooked before. A faint line running across the bottom edge of the image. Not a crack. Not damage. A floorboard seam, as if the photograph was taken from inside the house, from somewhere beneath it. The Whitmores stopped sleeping after the second photograph appeared, not because they were afraid of dreams, but because something was using them. Every time their eyes closed, the house changed. Walls shifted inches to the left. Doorways narrowed. Ceilings lowered just enough to feel wrong when standing beneath them. The photographs multiplied, appearing in frames they did not own, nailed into places where nails had never been driven. Each photograph showed the same thing, the family growing closer to the boy. Physically, emotionally, unnaturally. In the earliest images, he stood at a distance. In later ones, he touched them. A hand on Edgar's shoulder. Fingers threaded through Clara's hair. His face pressed close to Evelyn's neck, mouth slightly open. And always, his eyes were looking directly at whoever held the photograph. Margaret discovered something the photographs were hiding. She noticed it when she counted. Every image showed the same number of people, even when one of them was missing. The night Edgar disappeared, the photograph still showed 5 figures. The space where he should have been was blurred, stretched, but filled, occupied, by a shape that looked like the boy wearing Edgar's height. Margaret went beneath the house alone. The hollow had changed. What had once been an empty cavity was now lined with boards, old ones, hand-cut, uneven, nailed together from the inside. Symbols had been carved into them. Not words, not letters. Marks of ownership, marks of hunger. At the center of the space was something wrapped in fabric. The bundle she had lowered days earlier. It had been opened and used. Hair was woven into the boards. Teeth embedded into the seams. Clothing pressed flat against the wood as if absorbed. The boy was learning how to build. Margaret realized the truth too late. The boy was not bound to the photograph. The photograph was a warning, a record left behind when it was already too late to save the family inside. She found records in the attic that night. Old deeds. Older journals. Pages brittle with age, written by hands long buried. The land had been avoided even before the house was built. Locals called it a waiting place. A place where things arrived before they had names. Children born nearby went missing for generations. Always found days later. Always unharmed, but different. They stared too long, smiled too late, and drew pictures of rooms no one had shown them. The journals described something that studied families. It copied closeness, learned affection, practiced love until it could imitate it perfectly, and then it moved in. Clara was the first to accept it. She stopped crying, stopped resisting. She spoke to the boy like a brother, shared food with him, sat beside him when he appeared at the edge of her vision. Margaret watched her daughter's reflection one night and realized the girl was no longer blinking. The boy was blinking for her. Evelyn followed soon after. She began humming songs Margaret had never taught her. Songs without melody, only rhythm. Songs that matched the scraping inside the walls. When Margaret tried to intervene, Evelyn looked at her with the boy's eyes and asked why she was being unkind. The final photograph appeared on a Thursday. It showed the house from the outside. No people, no light in the windows, only the boy standing at the door, holding the key. Margaret understood. The house was no longer theirs. It never had been. It was a shell, a body being assembled from memories, bones, and photographs, and the boy was almost ready to leave it. Margaret wrote one last entry before disappearing. If you find this, do not look for us. Do not rebuild. Do not bring families here. The boy does not haunt. He replaces. Decades later, when the land was cleared, no remains were found. No bones. No graves. Only a single photograph buried beneath the foundation. It shows a modern family standing in front of a newly built home, and in the background, a child watching, waiting. The boy could never be destroyed because he was never alive. That truth was uncovered in a place no one thought to look. A courthouse basement. In 1911, a fire damaged county records near the Whitmore property. Most documents were lost. A few were misfiled, forgotten, sealed behind newer walls. Decades later, when renovations exposed a bricked-over archive room, one box survived untouched. Inside were birth records. None of them belonged to the boy, but many belonged to children who resembled him. Same height, same facial structure, same hollow eyes recorded again and again under different names, different families, different years. And always, the same notation scribbled in the margins by different clerks across decades. Child present at time of documentation. Parent insists second child does not exist. The pattern was unmistakable. The boy did not enter families. He emerged when families became vulnerable enough. Loss. Isolation. Distance between parents. A child left unheard. The house was irrelevant. The land was incidental. The boy followed fractures. In every recorded case, the family had reached a moment where love weakened just enough to be copied. A parent grieving a child. A sibling desperate for attention. A home filled with silence instead of touch. That silence was an invitation. The boy learned from observation. He never spoke first. Never touched first. He waited until someone wanted him to. Once welcomed, he mirrored affection imperfectly at first. Stiff smiles, delayed responses, eyes that stared too long. But he improved. Quickly, Margaret Whitmore's journals revealed the final truth. The boy was not consuming people. He was being shaped by them. Every family taught him something new. How to sit at a table. How to hug without tightening too much. How to look human. And when he learned enough, he moved on. The disappearance of the Whitmores was not a killing. It was a handover. Margaret's final entries describe the moment she understood. The boy did not want to stay. He wanted to become. He needed a new family that could carry him forward. Names, records, legitimacy. And for that, the original family had to fade. Not violently. Quietly. Forgotten. Margaret wrote, "He does not erase us. He replaces us with himself." Modern investigators made a mistake. They assumed the story ended in 1890. It did not. It continued, seamlessly, into the present. In 1997, a photograph surfaced during a genealogy project. A family of 4. Suburban home. Bright smiles. One child in the image did not appear in any school records. No birth certificate. No social security number. But neighbors remembered him clearly. They described him as polite, quote, quiet, helpful. They said he watched people carefully. They said he made them feel seen. The family moved without notice 2 years later. The house was sold. Empty. But something remained. Investigators reviewing the image noticed a flaw. In every photograph containing the boy from 1821 to the present, his reflection never aligned. Mirrors warped around him. Glass bent. Shadows leaned away. Because the boy was not copying bodies. He was copying behavior. He had no true shape of his own. The most recent photograph was taken 3 years ago. A realtor's listing photo. A happy couple. 2 children. And a third child standing slightly behind them. Out of focus. Watching. The case was closed, marked unsolvable. Filed under folklore. But one archivist noticed something no one else did. The boy was smiling differently now. Better. More convincingly. Because this time, he had learned how to stay. The archivist did not scream when she realized. Screaming would have meant surprise. This was recognition. She had been reviewing digitized photographs for 3 nights straight, comparing facial proportions across decades. The boy appeared again and again, always slightly altered, always closer to normal than before, until the last image, a modern photo, taken on her phone, by her. She had snapped it accidentally while documenting a cracked mirror in the archive restroom. The flash caught something behind her reflection, a child, standing where the hallway should have been. Close enough that she could see the pores on his skin, clear enough that the algorithm flagged the face as a match, 97.4% similarity to every previous appearance. She did not remember having children, but the fear did not come from that. It came from the absence of panic. Her mind accepted him too easily. The archivist returned home that night and found a drawing on her refrigerator. Crayon, stick figures, 3 of them, herself, her husband, and a boy holding her hand. She searched her house. Every drawer, every room. There were shoes in the hallway she did not remember buying. A backpack hanging by the door. A report card on the kitchen table. Perfect attendance. Excellent observation skills. Teacher's note at the bottom. He notices things the other children don't. Her husband spoke casually about him. Used his name. Corrected her gently when she hesitated. He's always been like that, he said. You forget things when you're tired. The boy never corrected anyone. He never introduced himself. He simply belonged. That night, the archivist finally understood the final rule. The boy does not force entry. He waits until a place is made for him. A mental gap. A memory weakened. A truth softened. She tried to fight it. Wrote notes to herself. Recorded messages. Left reminders hidden in books and walls. But every attempt dissolved. Notes vanished. Recordings corrupted. Even her own handwriting began to shift. Straighter. Younger. The boy watched all of it calmly. Learning restraint. Learning patience, learning permanence. One night, she asked him directly, "What are you?" He tilted his head, thought carefully, then answered with something he had learned long ago. "I'm what stays," he said, "when people stop looking closely." The final photograph was uploaded a month later. A family portrait. Bright lighting. Warm smiles. Nothing unusual, except one detail. The boy's eyes now reflected light correctly. That meant he no longer needed mirrors. He no longer needed photographs. He no longer needed permission. The archivist's final journal entry was found incomplete. Just one sentence, written shakily. If you are reading this and thinking of someone you almost remember, the page ends there. You may feel unsettled now. That's normal. You may feel like checking old photos. That's expected. But understand this. The boy does not live in pictures. Pictures are simply where people finally notice him. He lives in forgetting. In the moment you almost question a memory, and don't. In the child you don't remember meeting, but trust anyway. In the family resemblance that feels right enough to stop asking. And if tonight, you think you hear someone breathing softly just outside your door, don't open it. If you find an extra place set at the table, don't count the chairs. If you see a child in a photograph who shouldn't be there, do not zoom in. Because once you see him clearly, he's already learned how to stay. Forgotten remains. Some histories disappear for a reason.